"When's the wedding, Josh?" I asked, phone in hand, my voice steady though my heart carried a nervous tremor. Emily leaned back on my sofa as if she owned it, her smile sharp and deliberate. "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Her words sliced through me. Special people. I, who had covered their $600 rent every month for 3 years. I, who had filled their fridge when they couldn't afford milk. I, who had chosen that sofa she was sinking into with her smug little grin. Suddenly, the phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, heavy with betrayal. Josh didn't look at me. My only son, my baby, who once clung to my hand at the grocery store, couldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he fiddled with his phone, pretending he wasn't standing in the middle of my living room while his new wife humiliated me. In my bedroom closet hung the pale blue dress I'd bought for her wedding. The shoes, too. Together, they cost nearly $250, money I'd tucked away from my grocery budget. I had imagined how I'd look standing proudly beside my son, my arm linked with his as he started his new life. But in their wedding pictures, which I scrolled through later that night on Facebook, I wasn't anywhere. Emily's parents were front and center, holding champagne glasses high, her siblings laughing at the head table. There she was in a white gown I had unknowingly helped finance with the $800 she'd begged me for last month. I had seen it all, her smiling, her family celebrating. Everything I was told wasn't there. Josh had mumbled something rehearsed. "Mom, it was just intimate, small, just us and the witnesses." I didn't even argue. The lie sat there between us, thick and undeniable. 7 days later, my phone rang. Emily's voice was different this time. No smugness, no confidence. "Carol, the rent's due. The landlord says if we don't pay this week, he'll evict us. Did you forget the transfer?" Her tone trembled like a child caught in a storm. I let the silence stretch, my thoughts sharp and clear for once. How many times had I rushed to the bank for them? How many meals of canned beans had I eaten so they could have steak? How many nights had I cried, wondering if I was giving too much, only to give again anyway? Finally, I said evenly, "Emily, didn't I tell you I only help special people?" Her breath caught. Silence poured through the line so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. Then came the stammer. We've always been special to you. You've been like a second mom to me." Lies. I could hear them dripping in her honeyed tone, the same one she'd used to ask me for money for the honeymoon, the rings, the very wedding that had cut me out. I used to walk on eggshells, hoping for even the smallest scrap of love in return. But now, for the first time, I didn't tremble. I had been the perfect mother, the easygoing mother-in-law, the silent provider who kept giving even when they acted like I was invisible. But when Emily smirked and said only special people, something cracked open inside me that had been buried for years. That phrase echoed in my head like a bell tolling at a funeral. The death of my patience, my illusions, maybe even the relationship I thought I had with my only son. That night, I lay in bed doing the math in my head. Rent, groceries, furniture, bills, holidays, emergencies. The number grew larger and larger until I couldn't ignore it anymore. More than $20,000 over 3 years. Money I had pulled from the savings account my late husband left me, so I could live out my retirement in peace. Money that was supposed to keep me secure, not keep them comfortable. And what had I gotten in return? To be treated like a stranger on my son's wedding day. I cried until my pillow was damp, but the tears weren't soft or tender. They were jagged, pulled out of me by years of swallowed humiliation. I cried for the nights I skipped a proper meal so they could eat steak. For the mornings I dragged myself to the bank, terrified the landlord might change the locks on their door. For the birthdays when my gift felt more like an obligation than a joy. For every time my son looked through me instead of at me, and for the woman I had let myself become, desperate, invisible, small. When the sun came up, I felt different. Not lighter, not free, but hard. Something in me had cooled overnight, solidified. I went to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. The same crow's feet, the same tired eyes, but there was a glint in my gaze I hadn't seen in years, maybe decades. A kind of steel that used to belong to the younger me, the one who had raised a boy alone after her husband died. I brewed coffee like I always did, but for the first time, I didn't reach for my phone to check if Josh had texted. I didn't rehearse apologies in my head for things I hadn't done. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table. The table where I'd written countless checks for them, where I'd wrapped gifts they barely acknowledged, where I had cried alone, and I spread out my bank statements. I wanted to see it in black and white, to look at the numbers as if they were evidence in a trial, and in a way, they were. 36 months of rent, $21,600, groceries and supplies, easily $6,000, gifts, birthdays, Christmas anniversaries, $4,000. Emily's unexpected medical bill, $800. Their car loan that was never repaid, $2,500. That living room set Emily insisted she needed, $200. The busted air conditioner I covered, $730, $800. I stared at the total until my vision blurred. Nearly $37,000 I had siphoned away from my future, from the safety net my husband and I had built over decades of work. I thought about him then, about how furious he would have been to see me bleeding our savings dry for people who couldn't bother to say thank you. The phone rang. Josh's name glowed on the screen. I froze, waiting for the rush of hope that usually filled me at the thought of hearing his voice. But it didn't come. I let it ring until it went quiet. A few minutes later, it rang again. Emily. I didn't move. Then came the text. Mom, please answer. We need to talk. I deleted it without hesitation. At 2 o'clock, I put on my sneakers and walked out the door. Not to the bank, not to the grocery store, not to run another errand for them. Just for myself. The September air was crisp, and for the first time in years, my steps didn't feel heavy. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but as I walked down the sidewalk, one truth settled over me like armor. I wasn't their safety net anymore. Not now. Not ever again. It was always the same routine. The bank to send money, the grocery store to pick up things they forgot, the pharmacy for Emily's prescriptions. Every errand revolved around them. But that morning, I went out for a walk simply because I wanted to. The September air was cool, crisp, alive. I passed the park where I used to take Josh when he was little. I could still see that boy running toward me, arms open wide, telling me I was the best mom in the world. My throat tightened. When had that child turned into a man who saw me as nothing but a wallet with a heartbeat? When had I started confusing love with money, believing I had to buy my own son's affection? My feet carried me to the bank. I stopped in front of the glass doors, staring at the familiar building where I'd drained so much of myself away. Inside, I caught the eye of Mr. Klein, the branch manager, who had overseen every one of my transfers. He smiled warmly and waved. I walked straight into his office. Mr. Klein, I said firmly, I need to cancel the automatic transfers to my son and daughter-in-law. He blinked, surprised. Mrs. Harper, are you sure? You've been making these transfers for years. Did something happen? His voice held a kind of genuine care I hadn't felt from Josh in months. What happened, I replied, is that I finally opened my eyes. Cancel everything. And please, tell me how I can make sure no one else ever touches my accounts. I want my money protected. As he began typing, my phone buzzed again and again, Josh, then Emily, then Josh again. It was as if they could sense, like sharks in the water, that their steady source of income was slipping away. I powered my phone off and slid it into my purse. "Mrs. Harper," Mr. Klein said softly as he handed me the paperwork. "I don't mean to overstep, but I've watched you give and give. Please tell me you're not being pressured into these changes." His concern startled me. This man knew me only through numbers on a screen, yet he cared more about my well-being than my own son did. "No," I said, my voice steady. "For once, I'm not being pressured at all. I'm finally letting myself breathe." When I stepped out of the bank, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, my money was mine. No obligations, no guilt. No more pouring myself empty for people who only saw me as an endless resource. I thought about everything I had denied myself. The trips I postponed to cover their rent. The friendships I let fade because Emily might call with another emergency. The hobbies I abandoned because every dollar I spent on me was one less for them. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my newfound relief evaporated. 3 cars lined the curb, Josh's, Emily's, and one I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. Through the living room window, I saw movement. My chest tightened. They had keys. I'd given them keys because I believed, foolishly, that someday they'd take care of me the way I had taken care of them. I drew in a long breath, steadied my shoulders, and unlocked the door. The sight hit me like a blow. Josh sat slumped on my sofa, head in his hands. Emily was pacing the room like a cornered animal. And at my dining table, a man I had never seen before, a gray-haired stranger in a suit, was rifling through my personal papers as if they belonged to him. My bills, my bank statements, my life. What on earth is going on here? My voice came out sharper, louder than I expected. All 3 froze. Their heads snapped toward me as if I were the intruder in my own home. Emily rushed forward, her voice shaking with frantic urgency. "Carol, thank God you're here." But this time her desperation didn't melt me. It ignited something far stronger. "We need to talk." Emily's voice was thin, pitched high with false urgency. "This is Mr. Fisher. He's from the law firm we consulted about your situation." "My situation?" I asked, surprised at the calm in my own tone. "What situation?" "I'm doing perfectly fine." Josh finally raised his head from where he sat hunched on my sofa. His eyes, once bright with innocence, now only revealed the desperation of a man terrified of losing his safety net. "Mom, we went to the bank. They told us you canceled the transfers. Mr. Klein said you even blocked our access to your accounts." "We don't understand why you would do that." The stranger in the gray suit stepped forward, his hand extended, his smile oily and practiced. "Mrs. Harper, I'm Dr. Fisher, a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being. They asked me to meet with you, to assess the situation." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I walked past him and gathered the papers he had spread across my dining table. My bank statements, my retirement records, my life. "These are my private documents. You have no right to be looking at them without my permission." Josh's voice cut in, patronizing and cool. "Mom, we're worried. You've been acting strange lately. First you cut us off financially without warning, then you stopped answering our calls. We think maybe you need professional help." Emily came closer, her face painted with faux tenderness. She reached for my hand as if she were the caring daughter I never had. "Carol, sweetheart, we know you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is heavier than you realize. At your age, sometimes episodes of confusion are normal." That word, confusion, rang in my head like an alarm bell. And suddenly, I understood exactly what was happening. They hadn't brought this lawyer to help me. They had brought him to label me incompetent, to pry open the door to my accounts and take control of everything I had left. I am not confused, I said, my voice cutting sharp through the air. I am clearer than I have been in years. And you are all going to leave my house, now. Mr. Fisher spoke up, smooth and professional, the way lawyers do when they're trying to sound reasonable while slipping a knife between your ribs. Mrs. Harper, I understand this feels overwhelming, but your children have the right to intervene if they believe your judgment is impaired. They've documented concerning behavior. Concerning behavior? The laugh that escaped me was raw and bitter. Like what? Choosing to spend my money on myself? Choosing not to bankroll two adults who treat me like I'm nothing but a bank machine? Emily snapped upright, her face flushed. We never treated you badly. You are part of our family. Everything you own will belong to us one day anyway. We're just speeding up the process. There it was. The truth, stripped bare. In their eyes, I was already dead. My years didn't matter. 70 or 700, it was irrelevant. To them, I was nothing more than a walking ATM that had suddenly started misbehaving. Out, I said, my arm stiff, my finger pointing directly at the door. All three of you, get out of my house. Josh stood, his face twisted into the same petulant expression he'd worn as a boy when he didn't get his way. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off overnight. I can't. My voice rose, sharp and fierce, filling the room. Who says I can't? For years, I paid rent on an apartment that isn't even in my name. For years, I carried debt that never belonged to me. And now you dare to stand in my house, rifling through my papers and tell me I owe you more? For the first time, the silence in that room didn't belong to me. It belonged to them. I stocked a refrigerator in a house where my presence was unwanted. I paid bills for a life that, in the end, had no room for me. Mr. Fisher, their lawyer, placed a folder on my kitchen table with the ease of someone who had done this before. Mrs. Carter, he began in a careful voice, we've drafted documents that could help make this transition smoother. A temporary power of attorney. It would allow Josh and Emily to handle your finances while you focus on your health. It's just until things stabilize. I didn't even glance at the papers. I lifted the folder, crossed the room, and dropped it directly into the trash. The only transition happening here, I said, is yours, to the front door. Emily's eyes brimmed, but the tears weren't sorrow. They burned with rage, frustration leaking through her act. You can't do this, Carol. We were counting on you. We made plans. We bought things. We took on obligations because we knew you'd always help us. Obligations with my money, I answered, my voice steady. Not with my love, not with my happiness, not with my company, just my money. And now that I've decided my money is better spent on my own life, suddenly I'm too fragile to think straight. How convenient. Josh tried to soften his tone. Mom, mistakes were made. The wedding, it was a misunderstanding. Emily was anxious. I was under pressure. We didn't mean to hurt you. We can fix this if you'll just be reasonable. The word stung. Reasonable. For years, being reasonable had meant paying their rent, buying their groceries, covering their mistakes. It had meant swallowing my pain when I wasn't invited to the most important day of my only child's life. And now he wanted me to go back to that role, smiling and silent while they drained me dry. Mr. Fisher gathered his unused papers with the speed of a man who'd had refusals before. Mrs. Carter, this isn't finished. Your family has legal remedies. If your judgment is impaired, a judge can appoint a guardian. Sometimes these situations end up in court. His words cut deep. This wasn't just manipulation. It was a threat, a real one. They were ready to challenge my right to live freely. I met his eyes. Mr. Fisher, I suggest you tread carefully. You're threatening a woman who has managed her finances with precision for 40 years. I raised a child alone after my husband's death. I worked hard until retirement, never missed a mortgage payment, never asked for a handout. And until last week, I was supporting 2 grown adults who should have been supporting themselves. If you think a judge will see me as incompetent, you might want to review your case notes. Emily's tears vanished. She looked at me with a sharpness I had seen before but ignored, a glimpse of the cold ambition beneath her practiced smile. You'll regret this, Carol. We have rights and we know lawyers too. Good, I said calmly. Hire them, and pay them with your own money, because mine is no longer available to fund your battles. The 3 of them gathered themselves with the stiffness of people not used to being denied. As they reached the door, Josh turned back. His voice carried both anger and warning. Mom, this will end badly for you. You'll wind up alone with no one to care for you when the time comes. I looked at him, my heart heavy but my clarity unshaken. Josh, I said, I've already been alone. The only difference is now it's by choice, not by your neglect. I closed the door behind them and stood in the quiet. For the first time in years, the silence in my home wasn't heavy. It was liberating. It was the sound of freedom finally returned to me. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of sorrow, not because of regret, but because my heart was beating too fast, alive with adrenaline. For the first time in years, I felt like I was steering my own life. I lay in bed wide awake, not staring at the ceiling in despair, but mapping my next moves like a general preparing for war. If Josh and Emily wanted a battle, I'd give them one. But it wouldn't be a battle of tears or guilt. It would be fought with intelligence and preparation. By 6 in the morning, I was dressed, coffee in hand, keys in my purse. My first stop was the office of an attorney I trusted, Mr. Weber. I'd met him years ago when handling my husband's estate. And unlike the lawyer Emily had dragged into my home, this man had a spotless reputation. He specialized in protecting people like me, seniors who still had their wits about them but were often treated as if they didn't. I sat in his office, retelling everything that had happened, the insults, the folder of papers, the talk of guardianship. He listened carefully, then leaned back in his chair, his expression firm. Mrs. Carter, he said, what your son and daughter-in-law tried yesterday isn't rare. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's not just wrong, it's illegal. The fact that they came into your house without permission and went through your private documents? That's a violation too. His words calmed me because they confirmed what I had felt in my gut. I wasn't imagining things, but they also sent a chill through me. This wasn't just a family dispute. This was bigger, uglier. We'll need to document everything, Mr. Weber continued. Every bank transfer, every time they pressured you for money, every expense you covered. We'll also revise your will to protect your estate from any future manipulations. For 3 hours, we went line by line through my financial history. Mr. Weber stopped and whistled when he saw the total. Mrs. Carter, this is over $33,000 in just 3 years. With that, you could have traveled, upgraded your home, enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you've been carrying 2 able-bodied adults who didn't even respect you enough to include you in their wedding. When I walked out of his office, I had a plan sharper than any I'd made in years. First, I would change the locks on my doors. Second, I would install a full security system, cameras, alarms, everything. Third, I would move my savings into a new account at a bank where neither Josh nor Emily had any ties. And finally, I would start living for myself, no longer postponing joy out of misplaced loyalty. My next stop was the hardware store. Mr. Summers, the owner, had known me for years, mostly because I had spent too much time and money buying supplies for Josh and Emily's place whenever something broke. This time was different. What brings you in today, Carol? He asked with the friendliness of someone who had quietly watched me give too much for too long. Another emergency at your son's apartment? No, I said firmly. This time it's for me. I need to replace every lock in my house, and I want the best you have. He raised his eyebrows, clearly surprised, but didn't ask questions. While I was choosing the locks, his son Ethan walked in. Ethan worked installing home security systems. The timing felt like fate. Ethan, I said, I also need cameras. A complete setup. Price doesn't matter. I want it done right. He nodded, already pulling out his schedule. They would be at my house the very next morning. As I was leaving the store, my phone rang. The number was blocked. Against my better judgment, I answered. Emily's voice came through, soft and honeyed. She must have borrowed another phone since I'd blocked hers. Carol, please don't hang up, she said quickly. We need to talk like civilized adults. Go ahead, I replied flatly. I know you're hurt about the wedding. It was a mistake. Josh and I talked about it. We want to make it up to you. How about a special dinner, just the three of us? At your house. We could cook together, celebrate properly, like a family. Her tone was smooth, but it was too practiced. Too false. It was bait wrapped in sentimentality. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked, Emily, how much rent are you behind on? There was silence on the line. For the first time in years, I felt myself smiling. Not the polite smile I had worn while handing over cash, but the real smile of a woman who knew the game had changed. The silence on the other end told me I had struck the nerve I was aiming for. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice smaller than I had ever heard it. It's 2 months behind. $1,000. But Carol, I'm not just calling for that. We really miss you in our lives. I let out a sharp laugh. Do you miss me or my money? There was a pause. Then she whispered with a strange sort of honesty. Both. I won't lie to you. Yes, we need your help, but we love you too. You're important to us. If I'm so important, I said slowly, why wasn't I important enough to stand beside my only son on his wedding day? Why am I never important enough to get a phone call that isn't about bills or rent? Tell me, Emily, when was the last time you or Josh called me just to ask how I was doing? The line went quiet. She didn't have an answer, and we both knew it. Never, I said for her. Not once. Her voice turned pleading. Carol, please don't talk like that. We can fix this. We can make it right. There is no fixing this, I cut in. For 3 years, I paid your rent, filled your fridge, covered your mistakes. And in return? You ignored me. You mocked me. You humiliated me. And when it mattered most, you shut me out. Now that the money has stopped, suddenly you remember you love me. I see it for what it is. Please. There is no please, I said firmly. You and Josh made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough for your wedding. Now I'm making mine. And I hung up. I didn't just hang up on the call. I hung up on years of guilt, manipulation, and neglect. Then I switched the phone off entirely. No more interruptions on what was quickly becoming my day of liberation. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I went to the salon. How many appointments had I canceled over the years because Josh or Emily needed something more urgent? How many times had the money I set aside for myself magically become emergency rent or an overdue bill? Cynthia, my stylist, gasped when she saw me. Carol, I thought you had forgotten about us. I didn't forget you, I said as I settled into her chair. I just forgot that I deserved to be taken care of too. For once, I didn't hold back. I got the works, a fresh cut, a new color, a manicure, a pedicure. Hours passed as Cynthia pampered me, and I felt the weight of years sliding off my shoulders. She chatted about her kids, her dreams, her life. And it struck me how refreshing it was to have a conversation that wasn't about Josh and Emily's endless crises. When she spun me around to face the mirror, I barely recognized myself. "You look beautiful," Cynthia said softly. "But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen?" "Yes," I said, smiling. I finally learned how to say no. By the time I drove home, the sky was painted in evening gold. But as I turned onto my street, my heart skipped. A car I didn't recognize was parked in front of my house. For a moment, I panicked, thinking Josh and Emily had come back with more reinforcements. But then I saw her, an older woman sitting patiently on my porch steps. She stood as I got out of the car. "Mrs. Carter?" she asked gently. "Yes, that's me. I'm Eleanor Brooks. I live next door. We've been neighbors for years, but somehow we've never really spoken. Yesterday I heard shouting from your house. I just wanted to make sure you're all right." Her sincerity touched me more deeply than I expected. A stranger, a neighbor, showed more concern for me in 2 minutes than my own son had in years. "Come in, Eleanor," I said. "I'll make us some coffee, and you'll hear a story you won't believe." We sat at my kitchen table, steam rising from our mugs. I told her everything, the confrontation, the lawyer, the threats. She listened quietly, nodding, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, her face was wet with tears. "You did the right thing, Carol," she said. "I know, because I went through the same thing 5 years ago with my daughter. I thought it was my job to fund her life. I believed if I stopped paying, I'd lose her love. But when I finally cut it off, she lashed out. She threatened me, tried to guilt me. It was awful for months, my breath caught. What happened?" Her lips curved into a sad smile. "After 6 months, she called me, not to ask for money, but to apologize. For the first time in years, we talked like mother and daughter, not like creditor and debtor. Now we have a real relationship. A relationship built on love, not my checkbook." I sat there stunned, clutching my coffee, realizing that maybe, just maybe, the silence I was so afraid of wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning. Her words filled me with something I hadn't felt in years: hope. I had been questioning whether I was cruel, whether I had gone too far in cutting Josh and Emily off so abruptly. But Eleanor's calm conviction steadied me. "Do you think Josh and Emily will ever understand?" I asked her, my voice quieter than I intended. She didn't sugarcoat it. "Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But that's not yours to carry anymore. Carol, your job now is to live your life, not theirs." That night, for the first time in 3 long years, I went to bed without replaying every worry about their rent, their bills, their endless wants. I didn't toss and turn, waiting for a late-night text demanding help. I fell asleep thinking about me, about my own plans, my future. And I slept like a child, deeper than I had in years. At 8 a.m. sharp, Ethan and Mr. Summers arrived. The locks were changed, the cameras installed. The sound of drills and hammers in my home felt oddly comforting, like a fortress being built around my peace. My phone lit up again and again with calls from unknown numbers. Emily, no doubt, trying to sneak past my block. I ignored everyone. It had become my new favorite skill. "Mrs. Carter," Ethan said, adjusting a small monitor on my wall. "This system will give you complete peace of mind. You'll see who's at your door right from your phone, and if anyone tries to enter without permission, the police will be alerted immediately." The irony wasn't lost on me. I was installing a system to protect myself from my own son. A year ago, that thought would have broken me. Today, it just felt like common sense. When they left, I stared at my quiet living room, sunlight spilling across the floor. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I picked up the phone and dialed my sister Diana in Chicago. We hadn't spoken properly in months. Every time we did, I had turned our conversations into performance pieces about Josh and Emily. Look how successful they are. Look how much I've done for them. All those calls had been financial reports dressed as family updates. Carol? Diana answered, her voice a mix of surprise and relief. Sister, how are you? It feels like forever. I'm better than good, I said, almost laughing at the truth of it. I finally came to my senses. I told her everything about the secret wedding, the humiliation, the lawyer in my dining room, my decision to cut them off. I braced myself for judgment, but when I finished, she sighed with something that sounded like long-held relief. Carol, it was about time, she said. Every call we had, I wanted to scream at you. You talked about how much money you gave them, as if that proved they loved you. And it broke my heart because I knew it didn't. Her words stung, but they also soothed, like alcohol poured over an infected wound. What do you mean? I asked. I mean, she said carefully. I saw Josh at family gatherings. He never spoke about you with love. It was always, Mom helped me with this, or Mom bought me that. Never, I miss my mom. Never, I love my mom. It was like you were a service provider, not his mother. I closed my eyes. The truth cut deep, but it was undeniable. And Emily, Diana continued, her tone hardening. She always spoke about you in the future tense. I overheard her once saying, when Carol passes, we'll remodel her house. Or, when we inherit, we'll finally invest in the business. It was like they weren't living with you in the present, but already planning your absence. You weren't a person to them, you were a temporary obstacle between them and your money. The words landed like ice water down my back. All those years I believed I was giving them security, giving them love, when really I was giving them permission to imagine their lives without me. To them, I wasn't family. I was an inheritance on two legs. After Diana hung up, I sat in my kitchen in silence, hands wrapped around a mug of cooling coffee. My mind wandered through decades. 35 years of raising Josh alone after losing my husband, years of scraping and saving to build a safe life for us both. And then, 3 short years of letting it all bleed away to keep 2 people comfortable who were already plotting their lives after me. The doorbell rang. My heart jolted until I glanced at the new camera screen. There stood Eleanor again, this time with a steaming mug in her hands and a gentle smile on her face. For the first time in a long while, I felt ready to open the door, not out of obligation, not out of fear, but out of choice. I opened the door and found Eleanor standing there, holding out a steaming cup of coffee. "Thought you might need some company after everything you told me yesterday," she said with that warm, steady smile I had already learned to trust. We sat in the living room, the morning sun falling across the carpet, and she began to share more of her own story. "My daughter used to tell me the same things Emily says to you," she said. "You're like a second mom to me. We're special to you. One day everything will be ours anyway." All carefully rehearsed lines. Manipulation dressed as affection. "You think there's an actual handbook for this?" I asked, half joking. "Not an official one," she said with a dry laugh. "But it seems like they all read from the same script." Chapter 1. Make her feel indispensable. Chapter 2. Invent constant financial emergencies. Chapter 3. When she pushes back, question her mental health. We both laughed, though it wasn't a joyful laugh. It was the kind that stung, because we saw ourselves in the pattern. "Did you ever feel guilty for cutting your daughter off?" I asked. "Every single day for the first 3 months," Eleanor admitted. "But then I started to see changes. She got a second job. Her husband stopped wasting weekends on golf and started picking up side work. They adjusted. They learned how to live without using me as their safety net. And the biggest change? They finally saw me as a person again, not just a resource." Her honesty settled deep inside me. and by the afternoon I found myself doing something I'd avoided for far too long, visiting Robert's grave. For years, I always had an excuse. Josh and Emily needed something urgent, or I convinced myself the cab fare would be better spent bailing them out of another emergency. The cemetery was quiet, shaded by old oak trees. When I reached Robert's headstone, I felt a pang of guilt. The grave looked neglected, the flowers brittle and browned. I lowered myself onto the grass and spoke as though he were sitting beside me. "Robert, my love, I think I lost myself for a while. After you were gone, I poured everything into Josh. I wanted to be both parents, to make up for what he didn't have. But in doing that, I forgot who I was. Our son, he's become someone I barely recognize. Or maybe he was always this way, and I just couldn't see it. And Emily, well, you know the type she is. I thought I was helping them, but I realize now I was only draining what you left for me to live on. But no more. I've finally learned. A breeze stirred the leaves, brushing against me like an answer. I cleaned the headstone, replaced the wilted flowers with fresh ones I'd brought, and stayed for nearly an hour. For the first time in years, I didn't feel rushed to get back home and solve another crisis for Josh and Emily. I simply breathed, and it was enough. But peace is fragile. When I returned home, 3 cars were parked out front. My chest tightened, but I didn't panic. This time I was ready. The cameras showed Josh and Emily standing with 2 other strangers, all of them talking fast, pointing toward my house with angry faces. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I called my lawyer. "Mr. Weber, they're here again. Josh, Emily, and some others. They're on my property. What should I do?" "Stay in the car, Carol," he said firmly. "Don't engage. I'll be right there, and I'm calling the police now." After our talk yesterday, I filed for a temporary restraining order. They're not allowed to be near your house. Within minutes, Mr. Weber arrived, followed closely by 2 patrol cars. I watched from the safety of my seat as officers confronted Josh and Emily. My son's arms flailed in the air as he argued, his voice sharp and bitter. Emily cried, clutching at her chest like she was the victim, but for the first time, her tears didn't move me. One officer finally walked toward my car. "Ma'am, you can step out safely now," he said kindly. "Your visitors will be leaving immediately." I unbuckled my seatbelt, my hands steady, and opened the door. For the first time in a very long while, I felt like the one in control. As I stepped out of the car, Josh's voice tore through the street. "Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son." I met his anger with a calm I didn't know I had. Family doesn't threaten to have their mother declared incompetent. Family doesn't break into homes uninvited. Family doesn't drain a parent dry and call it love. Emily's voice rose, sharp and shrill from across the road. "You're going to pay for this. You co-signed bills. You can't just abandon us." Before I could answer, Mr. Weber stepped forward. "Any future communication must go through my office," he said firmly, "and I advise you to consult an attorney before making threats. My client has full documentation of every voluntary payment she made over the last 3 years. Their bravado wilted in front of his authority. I watched as Josh and Emily climbed back into their car, their faces tight with frustration, and drove away with the others who had come along. I knew it wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. I had Mr. Weber protecting me, Eleanor supporting me, and most importantly, a new sense of clarity about what was right. That evening, Eleanor invited me to dinner at her house. Her daughter was visiting, and I watched them interact with a tenderness that made my chest ache. They listened to each other, asked genuine questions, and laughed together without the undercurrent of demands or obligations. Her daughter never once mentioned money. Later, after she left, I admitted softly, I wanted that with Josh, too. I wanted respect, warmth, love without conditions. Eleanor touched my hand. Maybe one day. But only if he learns you're a person worthy of respect, not just a checkbook. That night I went to bed with something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. The following days passed in unusual calm. The cameras showed Josh and Emily driving by my house, sometimes slowing down, sometimes parking briefly, watching. I didn't confront them. Instead, I documented every instance, dates, times, details, just as Mr. Weber had advised. Their persistence will help us, he told me. Every visit after we've warned them builds evidence for a permanent restraining order. By Friday morning, I had almost convinced myself the storm might pass. I was eating breakfast when the doorbell rang. Checking the cameras, I saw a young woman, neatly dressed, holding a folder, her smile professional but cool. She wasn't a neighbor or acquaintance. Something in her posture told me this wasn't a friendly call. I opened the door cautiously. "Good morning, Mrs. Carol Brooks," she said smoothly. "I'm a social investigator from the Office of Senior Services. We received a report that you may be in a high-risk situation, and I'm here to conduct a wellness check." My stomach sank. Josh and Emily had escalated. They'd dragged the government into it. "Can I see your identification?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Of course. She handed me an official ID that looked authentic. "My name is Mrs. Schmidt. May I come in and speak with you?" Refusing would only make things worse, so I let her in. She settled into the armchair and opened her folder, pen ready. "Mrs. Brooks," she began formally, "we've received reports that you've shown concerning changes in your financial behavior. That you've cut off communication with close family members. That you may be displaying signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. And that you've refused medical and legal assistance from your loved ones." I felt my blood run cold. Josh and Emily hadn't just lied. They had built an entire case to paint me as unstable. Every line of that report had been sharpened like a knife, designed to carve me into the image of a fragile, unstable old woman. I could almost hear Emily's hand in it, her polished, manipulative way of twisting words until lies sounded like concern. "Mrs. Schmidt," I said, keeping my voice steady and my back straight. "Before I answer a single question, I'd like to contact my attorney." She gave me the kind of polite smile people use when they think they're in control. "Ma'am, this isn't an interrogation. It's just a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't have a problem speaking with me." That phrase lit a fire in me. I had heard it too many times from people who thought privacy was a privilege, not a right. Abusers always used it. If you're innocent, you shouldn't mind if I look through your things. I wasn't falling into that trap again. "Miss Schmidt," I said firmly, "you can wait here or you can come back. But I will not answer a single question without my lawyer present." I called Mr. Weber, and true to his word, he was at my doorstep in 20 minutes. His expression darkened when he saw the social worker seated in my living room. After checking her identification, he folded his arms. "I hope you have a court order, because my client is under legal representation. Any attempt to interrogate her without proper authority is harassment." Mrs. Schmidt hesitated, her earlier confidence faltering. "We received reports from concerned family members. It's our duty to investigate claims of neglect or mental decline." Mr. Weber didn't flinch. "Concerned family? You mean the same family that pressured her into signing over her rights without counsel? The same family that broke into her home and rifled through her private documents? The same family that lived off her retirement while excluding her from their own wedding?" He opened his briefcase and set a thick folder on the table. "Here's my documentation. 3 years of financial exploitation totaling $33,400. records of exclusion, manipulation, and emotional blackmail. If anyone here deserves an investigation, it's not my client. It's them. Mrs. Schmidt's fingers stiffened as she flipped through the papers. Her eyes darted between the neatly documented evidence and the woman sitting across from her, me, clear-eyed and composed. Finally, she looked at me. Mrs. Brooks, can you explain why you stopped providing financial assistance to your son so abruptly? Because I realized I was being used, I said simply. Because I finally understood that to them, I wasn't a mother, I was an ATM. And I refused to spend the rest of my life financing two grown adults who see me as an obstacle instead of a person. But don't you feel, she pressed gently, that as a mother, it's your responsibility to help your family? That question stung, but I met it head on. My responsibility as a mother was to raise my son, to teach him right from wrong, and to prepare him to be an independent adult. I did that. He's 35 years old, married, and fully capable of supporting himself. Supporting him financially now is not my responsibility, it's a choice. And I have chosen to stop. Mr. Weber leaned forward. Tell me, Mrs. Schmidt, do you consider it normal for a 35-year-old man to rely on his 71-year-old mother to pay his rent? She didn't answer right away. I saw her carefully rearranging the pieces in her head, realizing that the picture painted by Josh and Emily wasn't matching the reality before her. Mrs. Brooks, she asked finally, do you manage your own finances independently? I nodded. I do. I can show you my bank statements, my investments, my tax filings. Everything is in order. Do you live independently? I gestured around. You can see for yourself. I keep my home clean. I drive my own car. I cook. I manage my own errands, and I maintain relationships with my neighbors. Are you on any regular medications? Just vitamins, I replied. And occasionally an aspirin. Her pen stopped moving. The silence stretched, heavy but no longer threatening. For the first time since she'd entered my home, I felt the ground tilting back in my favor. Would you like me to continue the story and show how the social worker's visit changes the balance of power between Carol and Josh Emily? I don't have any medical conditions that require prescriptions. Just a few vitamins and the occasional aspirin when I get a headache. Mr. Weber leaned forward and added, my client recently completed a full medical evaluation as part of our preparation for this case. Both mentally and physically, she is in excellent condition. The social worker, Mrs. Schmidt, hesitated, then closed the folder in front of her. Mrs. Carroll, she said carefully, based on what I've seen and the documents reviewed, I find no reason to believe you are in danger or incapable of caring for yourself. I will be closing this file. When she left, the silence in the room felt heavy. Mr. Weber studied me with a seriousness that only made my pulse quicken. Carol, he finally said, I need to be honest with you. This isn't over. Josh and Emily are investing time and money they don't even have to push this narrative. Their goal is simple. Have you declared legally incompetent? My breath caught. Does that mean they're desperate? He nodded. That's exactly what it means. They know they can't pressure you anymore, so their only path forward is to convince a judge you're unfit. It's difficult, costly, and usually unsuccessful. But if they find a sympathetic court and a hired expert willing to say what they want, they could try to place your assets under guardianship. The thought chilled me to the bone. That would mean losing control of everything. My money, my decisions, my independence. They can try, Mr. Weber replied firmly, but we've built strong evidence proving you are of sound mind, and it's clear their motivation is greed, not care. The law is not blind to that. Later that afternoon, I called my sister Diana, needing her voice, her grounding presence. When I told her everything, she was quiet for a moment before saying, Carol, do you see how far they've sunk? They are burning bridges, wrecking their reputations, and throwing money at lawyers, all because they want your bank account back. That's not family love. That's entitlement. Her words struck me deeper than she knew. She was right. Josh and Emily had exposed their true colors with no shame. There was no mending this, no possibility of reconciliation. To them, I had never been a mother, never been respected as a mother-in-law. I was a living wallet, nothing more. The realization burned, but in a strange way it also freed me. For the first time I felt no guilt about pulling away. Protecting myself wasn't selfish. It was survival. They had already decided my worth lay only in what I could provide financially. That evening, Eleanor, my neighbor, came by with a surprise. She brought 4 friends from her garden club, women she thought I should meet. "Carol," she said warmly, "this is Cynthia. You know her from the salon. Maria, Carmen, and Alfreda. Each of them has walked through storms like yours." We spent hours together, drinking tea and swapping stories that felt painfully familiar. Maria told us about a brother who always came with his hand out, but never with genuine concern. Carmen confessed she had cut ties with her own daughter when she realized every visit ended with a financial request. Alfreda, wise at 80 years old, shared how she had rewritten her will after, discovering her grandchildren openly discussed her savings as though it were their retirement plan. I finally admitted aloud what had been sitting in my chest like a stone. The money I lost isn't what hurts the most. What cuts me deepest is knowing that the love I thought I had was never really there. Alfreda looked at me with soft eyes. "True love, Carol, can't be bought. If it has a price tag, it isn't love, it's leverage. What you had wasn't affection, it was dependency. And you don't owe anyone your peace of mind for the sake of keeping that illusion alive." Her words soothed something raw inside me. She was right. I hadn't lost real love. I had only stopped financing an act. I took a deep breath and said to the group, "You know what I've learned? Being surrounded by people who don't care about you is the loneliest place in the world. I'd rather be alone in my own company than smothered in fake affection. At least now when I sit in silence, I can trust the quiet." Laughter rippled around the room, not mocking but warm, understanding. We raised our cups and toasted to freedom, to wisdom that only comes with scars, and to the strength of women who refuse to be broken. After they left, I sat in the garden, the night air crisp against my skin. Above me, the stars seemed brighter, steadier, as if the sky itself was reminding me that light always returns after darkness. Or maybe, I thought, I was finally seeing clearly for the first time in years. For the first time in decades, I was living entirely on my own terms. No one relied on me financially anymore, and I owed nothing to anyone but myself. Instead of frightening me, that reality thrilled me. I could travel whenever I pleased. I could finally remodel the kitchen I'd dreamed about for years. I could buy myself a new wardrobe without feeling guilty. I could donate to charities that mattered to me instead of pouring money into the bottomless pit of entitlement. I could invest in my own future rather than financing the comfort of people who had never appreciated me. Freedom didn't feel empty. It felt like oxygen. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was planning. I was dreaming. A month after the social worker's visit, I thought the storm had finally passed. My days fell into a lovely rhythm. I started each morning with coffee and the newspaper at the kitchen table, sunlight pouring in through the curtains. I worked in my garden, shared lunches with Eleanor or one of the women from the garden club, and rediscovered hobbies I had abandoned long ago. Painting had once been my passion, and now my afternoons were spent at an easel, brushes in hand, coaxing flowers and landscapes to life with color. For the first time since Josh and Emily had started their campaign against me, I felt alive again. But one Thursday morning, while painting a vase of roses, I saw Mr. Weber's car pull up. He came to the door with an expression so grave my hands began to shake before he even spoke. "Carol," he said, stepping inside. "We need to talk. Josh and Emily have filed a formal petition in family court. They're asking the judge to declare you mentally incompetent and to appoint a legal guardian. They want Josh assigned." The words dropped like stones in my chest. I had prepared myself for the possibility, but hearing it aloud was another matter entirely. "Does that mean—" My voice faltered. "Does that mean they could take control of my money?" "If a judge believes their case, yes," he admitted carefully. "Josh could be granted authority over all your finances." I sank onto the sofa, stunned, the betrayal cutting deeper than anything I had ever felt. My own son was trying to strip me of my independence to seize what I had worked for all my life. What evidence could they possibly have? I asked, my voice trembling. "You've seen yourself that I'm perfectly capable." Mr. Weber opened his briefcase. "They submitted statements from 3 supposed witnesses who claim you've been acting erratically. They also attached unpaid medical bills they allege you've ignored and a claim that you've been hoarding prescriptions you never use." "That's a lie," I burst out. "I have no unpaid bills and I don't stockpile medication. I barely take anything stronger than aspirin." "I know," he said firmly. "But they've put together paperwork that looks convincing. They also filed a report from Dr. Lehman claiming you refused to comply with a psychiatric evaluation. They're presenting that as proof you're deteriorating mentally." The manipulation was stunning. They had twisted my refusal to submit to Emily's demands into evidence against me. What I had done to protect myself, they now wielded as a weapon. "Who are the 3 witnesses?" I asked, bracing myself. Mr. Weber flipped through his notes. "Emily, of course. A neighbor named Mr. Davis, and a pharmacist, Mr. Green." "Mr. Davis?" I said bitterly. "The one across the street who's never forgiven me for my guests parking near his house." I shook my head. "And Mr. Green? My own pharmacist? Why on earth would he be against me?" Something felt wrong. "I need to speak with him," I told Mr. Weber. That afternoon, we drove to the pharmacy together. Mr. Green looked startled when he saw me walk in, and even more unsettled when I asked for a private word. His hands fidgeted on the counter, and his cheeks flushed bright red. "Mr. Green," I said calmly, though my heart pounded in my chest, "I've been told you signed a statement saying I misuse or mishandle my prescriptions. Is that true?" He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "Mrs. Carroll, your daughter-in-law came in a few weeks ago. She said she was worried about you, that you'd been acting strangely. She asked me about your medications, what you take, how often, whether you fill them on time." "And what did you tell her?" I asked, my voice sharper now. His face burned crimson. "I didn't say you did anything wrong. I just told her you only take vitamins and the occasional aspirin." She must have twisted my words into something else. "I swear, I never said you were erratic." I stood frozen for a moment, fury and heartbreak colliding inside me. Emily had gone so far as to pressure my pharmacist, turning even his simple truth into ammunition. They weren't just trying to control me. They were willing to lie, falsify, and destroy reputations to get what they wanted. Mr. Weber put a steady hand on my arm. "This is exactly the kind of manipulation we'll expose in court. Don't lose heart, Carol. Lies have a way of unraveling when held up to the light." But even as he spoke, I couldn't stop thinking of Josh, my son, my own flesh and blood. How had he allowed himself to sink so low? How could he let his wife turn him against me so completely? And worse, how could he stand by while she dragged strangers into a campaign to declare me unfit? I left the pharmacy with the awful clarity that nothing was too low for them. And if I didn't fight with everything I had, They would win. I told Mr. Green plainly, all I buy are vitamins and the occasional aspirin. I don't have regular prescriptions, and you know that. He nodded quickly. I explained that to your daughter-in-law, but she twisted it. She insisted it meant you weren't taking proper care of yourself. Then she brought me a paper, looked official, something about confirming your medication history. I thought it was for insurance, so I signed it. I swear, Mrs. Carroll, I didn't realize it was for a lawsuit. The betrayal stung, though I could see he had been manipulated just like I had been for years. Emily's cunning had no limits. Mr. Green, I said firmly, I need you to write a statement clarifying the truth. I want it in your own words, that I don't have prescription issues, and that you never said I did. His face burned red with shame. Of course. I'll do it right away. I'm so sorry. From there, Mr. Weber and I went to face Mr. Davis. The man opened the door with a scowl. His hostility radiated. What do you want? He barked. Mr. Weber stayed calm. We understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior. Can you explain what you observed? You bet I did, Davis shot back. She's been acting strange, installing cameras everywhere, strange people coming in and out of her house and yelling at her family in the street. She's lost it, I clenched my jaw. His words were full of half-truths. Mr. Davis, I said steadily, do you know why I installed those cameras? Paranoia, he sneered. No. To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law, who broke into my home and threatened me. That's exactly what a crazy person would say. His tone was cruel, dismissive. It was useless. He wasn't interested in the truth, only in feeding his spite. His words were shallow observations twisted into accusations. That evening, Mr. Weber and I sat at my kitchen table, the weight of it all pressing down. Carol, he said, we need to secure our own psychiatric evaluation. I trust a colleague, Dr. Moore. She's a respected expert in mental capacity cases. Her testimony will carry real weight. My voice trembled. And if Josh and Emily buy off the judge? What if the truth doesn't matter? He shook his head firmly. The system isn't perfect, but it isn't lawless either. We have strong evidence. Your finances are clean, your health is excellent, and their motives are transparent. We will fight, and we will win. The next morning, I kept my appointment with Dr. Moore. She was in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes softened by kindness. Mrs. Carroll, she said warmly, I'll be asking you some questions, giving you a few tests. Just take your time and be honest. My goal is to understand your mental and emotional state. For nearly 2 hours, she questioned me about dates, places, family history. She had me balance numbers in my head, solve logic puzzles, recall details from short stories, and explain my financial decisions. When she finally set her pen down, her expression was firm but encouraging. Your cognitive function is not just normal, it's above average for your age. You are entirely capable of managing your affairs. I felt my throat tighten. Then why would my own son try to strip that from me? Her voice was gentle but steady. What you're facing is elder financial exploitation. Sadly, it's more common than most people realize. Families often cloak greed and concern. But in your case, the pattern is clear. The words brought both relief and sorrow. Relief that a professional had validated what I knew all along, but sorrow that my own flesh and blood was the cause. Later that day, Eleanor gathered the garden club for an emergency meeting. I sat in her cozy living room recounting everything. The lawsuit, the lies, the fabricated witnesses. The women erupted with outrage. Carol, this is outrageous, Maria said, her voice trembling. We'll testify. Every one of us. Carmen leaned forward, fierce in her support. We've seen you manage your home, your finances, your friendships. You're more capable than half the people half your age. Alfreda, the eldest of the group, squeezed my hand. They may think they can strip you of your dignity, but they can't take what you've proven every single day. You are strong, competent, and no one's fool. In that moment, surrounded by true friends, I felt something I hadn't in months: hope. They could try to drag me through the courts. They could lie, manipulate, and scheme. But I wasn't standing alone anymore. I had allies. I had proof. And most importantly, I had clarity. Josh and Emily weren't going to break me. They were about to face a fight they couldn't win. We had been meeting almost every day, and everyone around me could see how well I was doing. Cynthia leaned across the table with her usual energy. "Carol, you're sharper and steadier than half the women I know in their 40s. Alfreda, who carried 80 years of lived wisdom like a crown, clasped my hands. "My dear, this isn't new. Children have tried to discredit their parents for generations, all for money. They whisper incompetence not out of love but out of greed. But you have something rare: documentation, strong legal counsel, and friends willing to stand beside you. That is power." Her words steadied me. For the first time, I realized I wasn't standing in this storm alone. I had a circle of women who had witnessed my resilience, my choices, and my strength. They could testify not just for me, but to the truth. Still, the grief cut deep. "Do you know what breaks me most?" I asked quietly. "That Josh and Emily are willing to burn every bridge of reconciliation for money. Even if I wanted to forgive, how could there be a way back from this?" Cynthia's voice was firm. "Maybe there shouldn't be a way back. Sometimes clarity is better than reconciliation. At least now you know the truth. You don't have to waste any more of your love on illusions." That night I cried for the son I thought I had, for the family I had dreamed of, for the love I believed was unconditional. But my tears weren't just for loss. They carried away weakness and left behind steel. What rose in me was unshakable determination, not just to protect my savings, but to defend my dignity, my freedom, and my right to live on my own terms. 3 weeks later, the trial began. I woke before dawn, dressed in a sharp black suit, and studied my reflection. My eyes held a fire that hadn't been there before. Today wasn't just about legal definitions. It was about my worth as a person, my independence, and whether age could strip me of the right to decide my own life. Mr. Weber arrived at 7 to review strategy. "Carol, remember, the burden of proof is on them. They must prove incompetence. You don't have to prove perfection. You just have to be yourself." "What if the judge is already leaning their way?" I asked. He shook his head. "Judge Miller is known for fairness. I reviewed his past rulings. He doesn't bend to manipulative family claims. He protects elders' rights. That's why I trust this courtroom." At 9, we walked into the courthouse. My stomach twisted when I saw Josh in a brand new suit. His tie knotted too tightly, as if dressing well could disguise betrayal. Emily stood at his side in a sleek black dress, the picture of composure. Her eyes locked with mine, cold and flat, as if this were nothing but a business negotiation. Josh couldn't meet my gaze at all. Their attorney was a polished man in his 60s, with the kind of composure earned from years of winning cases like this. When he stood to deliver his opening statement, his voice filled the courtroom with practiced authority. "Your Honor," he began, his tone dripping with concern, "my clients are heartbroken to bring this matter before the court. Mrs. Carol Thompson has shown troubling signs of decline. She abruptly cut off financial support for her only son without reason. She installed excessive security systems fueled by paranoia. She has pushed away family and surrounded herself with opportunistic strangers who prey on her vulnerability. These are not the decisions of a rational, competent woman. They are signs of decline, confusion, and manipulation." Each word was crafted like a blade. meant to recast my independence as delusion, my self-protection as paranoia, and my friendships as exploitation. But as I listened, something inside me steadied. He was twisting the truth. Yes, but truth, when spoken in the light, has a way of cutting sharper than lies. The war had begun in earnest, but I was ready. They began their parade of witnesses with Emily. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed her myself. She stepped to the stand, hands folded neatly in her lap, her voice breaking as she spoke. Your Honor, Carol has always been like a mother to me, but in recent months she has changed so drastically. She's become paranoid, angry, and so withdrawn. We only want her to be safe, to receive the care she needs. Her eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling like she was auditioning for an award. Lies wrapped in sentiment can be dangerous, and she wielded them skillfully. But when Mr. Weber rose for cross-examination, the performance started to unravel. Mrs. Thompson, he said, calm but firm, can you tell the court the last time you called Carol simply to check on her, without asking for money? Emily hesitated. Well, we talked about many things. A specific date, please. I don't recall exact dates. Is it true you and your husband married without inviting her? It was a very small ceremony, she murmured. And when my client asked about the wedding, isn't it true you told her only special people were invited? Color rose to Emily's cheeks. Those words were taken out of context. What context makes it acceptable to tell your mother-in-law she is not special? Emily's silence was louder than any answer. Next came Josh. Seeing him place his hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth, and then preparing to twist it into lies, that was one of the sharpest pains of my life. I remembered every scraped knee I had bandaged, every night I had stayed awake until he got home safe, every sacrifice I made so he could have more than I did. My mom has always been very generous with us, he said smoothly. But lately she's been erratic, irrational. We fear she's being manipulated by people who want to take advantage of her. Mr. Weber stood, his papers crisp in his hands. Mr. Thompson, in the last 3 years, how much money have you received from your mother? Josh shifted in his seat. I don't know the exact number. Would $3,400 sound about right? Maybe. She's always been generous. And how many times did you visit her in those years without asking for money? Josh's silence filled the courtroom like a confession. Isn't it true that you and your wife entered her home without permission and searched through her private documents? We were worried about her, Josh stammered. And isn't it true you brought a lawyer into her home to pressure her into signing over power of attorney? We just wanted to help her manage her finances. Mr. Weber paused, his voice steady but cutting. You are 35 years old, correct? Yes. And at 35, do you truly need your 71-year-old mother to pay your rent? Josh's eyes dropped to the table. Dignity deserted him. Their next witness, a neighbor named Mr. Davis, spoke about my supposed strange behaviors. Cameras on my property, visitors at odd hours, raising my voice in the street. Yet under cross-examination, he admitted he'd never once spoken to me directly. All his impressions were guesses, patched together from gossip and passing glances. Dr. Lehman, their so-called expert, testified that my reluctance to undergo his evaluation was proof of mental decline. But Mr. Weber produced the full report from Dr. Moore, who had already tested me extensively. Her findings directly contradicted his claims, painting a picture not of decline but of strong cognitive health. Then it was our turn. Mr. Green, my pharmacist, spoke first. He admitted he had been misled into signing a paper that distorted my medication history, making it seem like I was careless with my prescriptions. I regret it deeply, he said. Mrs. Thompson has no issues with medication. I was deceived, Dr. Moore followed, laying out her findings with clarity. She explained my flawless cognitive scores, my excellent reasoning, and my financial literacy. Mrs. Thompson, she said, is not only competent, she is thriving for her age. Mr. Summers, the owner of the hardware store, explained my decisions to end certain automatic transfers and secure my home. She came in personally, explained her reasoning, and made smart choices. Nothing about it suggested confusion. Eleanor and my garden club friends each testified, their voices carrying the weight of truth. They spoke about my clarity, my vitality, my ability to maintain friendships, my joy in new activities. They told the court I was not isolated or paranoid, but engaged, purposeful, and full of life. Finally, it was my turn. I stood, walked to the witness stand with my shoulders squared, feeling the years on me not as weakness but as armor. 71 years of mistakes, lessons, endurance, and survival. Mr. Weber guided me gently, asking questions that allowed me to tell my story. I spoke about the years of support I had given Josh, about the $3,300 to $400 spent in just 3 years to keep him afloat, about the betrayals that had followed. As I looked around the courtroom, I felt the truth anchor me. This wasn't just about money. It was about who I was and who I refused to let them turn me into. The memory of being left out of Josh and Emily's wedding still stung, even as I sat on the witness stand. The emotional manipulation, the constant pressure for money, the invasion of my privacy, and the legal threats, they were all part of the same long betrayal. Mr. Weber's voice was steady when he asked the question that mattered most. Mrs. Thompson, why did you decide to stop providing financial support for your son and daughter-in-law? I lifted my chin and spoke so that every person in that courtroom could hear me. Because I finally realized that what I was receiving from them was not love. It was a transaction. My money was welcome, but I as a person was not. Do you regret your decision? I only regret that it took me this long to see the truth, I said firmly. Josh's attorney tried to rattle me during cross-examination, but every question was met with a clear, calm answer. When he implied that my friends had manipulated me, I told him plainly, for the first time in years, I have friendships built on respect, not on what I can give financially. His face tightened, but he pressed on, trying to twist my independence into instability. Each time I responded with the clarity of someone who knew her worth. When it was time for closing arguments, Josh's lawyer painted me as a frail old woman ensnared by outsiders. His words were polished but hollow. Then Mr. Weber rose, his presence commanding. Your Honor, this is not the story of a woman in decline. This is the story of a woman who has finally found the courage to break free from years of financial and emotional exploitation. The plaintiffs have presented no medical evidence of incompetence. What they have shown is frustration that their source of income has chosen to assert her basic right to independence. The courtroom was silent. When he sat down, Judge Miller deliberated for 2 long hours, though it felt like an eternity. When he returned, his face was grave but clear. After reviewing all evidence, he began. This court finds that Mrs. Carol Thompson is fully competent. The psychiatric evaluations confirm her mental strength and cognitive clarity. Her financial decisions, though disappointing to her son and daughter-in-law, are rational and entirely within her rights. Furthermore, the evidence strongly suggests that this lawsuit was motivated by financial gain rather than genuine concern. He paused, his words heavy in the air. The petition for guardianship is denied. My heart surged with relief. I had won. Not just the case, but my freedom, my dignity, and my right to live as myself, not as someone else's bank account. Outside the courtroom, I caught sight of Josh and Emily. They stood close, whispering furiously to their lawyer. Emily shot me a glare filled with venom before storming off. Josh lingered a moment, and for just a second, his eyes flickered with something that looked like regret. But it was far too late. That evening, Diana and Eleanor gathered everyone at my house. We toasted not just to the verdict, but to freedom, to resilience, and to the unshakable strength of women who stand together. Carol, Alfreda told me, her voice steady with age and wisdom. Today you didn't just win a trial. You reclaimed your life? She was right. For the first time in decades, my life was mine. I could travel where I wished, paint without guilt, donate to causes I cared about, and live without manipulation weighing me down. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved into a sunlit apartment near the city center. I gave half my savings to organizations that fight elder abuse and exploitation. With the rest, I began living the life I had always postponed for the sake of others. I spent a summer wandering through Europe, took art classes, and poured myself into volunteer work. I never heard from Josh and Emily again. Through the grapevine, I learned they had downsized into a small apartment and that Emily had taken a job, her first in years. Perhaps the hardship would teach them lessons that my generosity never could. As for me, I had no regrets. The trial had been a battlefield, but it gave me back more than a verdict. It gave me my voice, my freedom, and a future that finally belonged to me. Some evenings, when I step out onto the balcony of my new apartment and look up at the stars, I think about the woman I used to be. A year ago, I was living in fear, manipulated into believing I had to buy love to earn my place in the world. I thought family loyalty could be purchased with checks and cash transfers. I thought silence and sacrifice would eventually be repaid with affection. That woman is gone. In her place stands someone entirely different, a woman who finally understands one of life's most important truths. Love cannot be bought, and freedom is never too costly. I learned it the hard way, but I am grateful I learned it at all. My name is Carol. I am 72 years old, and I have discovered that the most important person I have to protect and care for is myself. Not because I stopped caring for others, but because I finally recognized that my worth does not depend on what I can provide financially. My value is not tied to the size of my bank account or the favors I can hand out. It lies in my character, my choices, and the peace I now feel when I wake up every morning knowing I am free. When I see Josh and Emily's faces in my memory, I no longer feel anger. I feel something closer to pity. They thought security could be built on manipulation. They thought shortcuts and lies would carry them further than hard work. But life has a way of teaching lessons in its own time. The value of honest work, the dignity of independence. Those are truths no amount of scheming can replace. I often sit with Diana, my sister, and we laugh about how far I've come. She tells me she's proud of me, and I believe her, but more importantly, I am proud of myself. I reclaimed my voice, my freedom, and my dignity. I didn't just win a trial in a courtroom. I won the right to live the rest of my life on my own terms. And now, I want to share this with you. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have fought as I did, or would you have taken another path? I would love to hear your thoughts. Every perspective matters because stories like mine are not rare. Too many people face similar battles in silence. If my journey resonated with you, I invite you to share your opinion in the comments. Tell me where you first came across this story, and let me know if you've faced something similar in your own life. And if you'd like to hear more real-life stories like this one, consider subscribing. There are so many others waiting to be told. With heartfelt gratitude, until next time, Carol.